And so I'm David Hawks with Path to Agility, CEO, founder, and also an Agile coach and trainer. And I'll be walking you through two things kind of today. One, what we call kind of the Path to Agility approach and how we look at things, but then also Path to Agility Navigator, which is a product tool that you can use as well when managing your transformations or your, Agile adoption. So let's jump on in with our first kind of slide. So what we're going to be looking at when we kind of talk about transformation management, or you could look at this as just continuous Agile improvement. We look at things in a couple different ways of like, we need to be able to evaluate where we are, kind of visualize that, and be able to analyze, make some sense out of that. So, what is going on that will inform our next actions that we can prioritize and act upon. And so we're going to walk through all of these different elements today and kind of share with you how we go about solving for those problems and those challenges. So let's start first with how we kind of see the world of Agile adoption, Agile transformation, and some of the challenges that we're facing and you might be facing as well. And we'll kind of set the stage with that so that then we can show you how we address some of those concerns. So I've been doing this poll. I do a lot of public speaking at the conferences or meetups and things like that. And I've been running this poll for about 7 years now and gathering data and kind of like, where is everybody's kind of agility at? And so I want you to look through kind of these different, kind of stages and think about like where you may be at today. Anywhere from superficial agility, I call this like putting Agile lipstick on a waterfall pig. Like we're going through the motions of Agile, but we're not really, getting all the benefits of Agile, or we're in this like improving agility, like we're trying to get better, but we're not really getting more predictable or getting faster, or we have gotten more predictable and faster. And the data continues to come back pretty consistently that a third of the market is still stuck in kind of a superficial agility where, they're just, it's like what do we call that? Taco Scrum. It's like we're using all the titles and the terms, but we're not actually, doing the things. We're not working with more agility. We haven't shifted from a mindset perspective. Or, I've heard business leaders, it's like, yeah, y'all go do Agile, but like, what's the date? What's going to be in it? Like, we're not really shifting. So we got 30% that are kind of in that superficial. We got about 50% that's in improving, but hasn't actually achieved the true benefits. And what we really want to see is the majority of people getting more predictable and getting faster. And so what we're going to be digging into is, why do we think that's the case? Why are organizations getting stuck? And how can we kind of unlock the ability to get to more predictable, faster, more adaptable organizations? One of the big challenges and kind of failure patterns that we see is what I call, trying to just implement practices or like do Scrum or do safe. And it's like, if we just implement all the things in the big picture, then we'll be Agile. And the reality is that's not really the case. Like we could do all the things, but not necessarily have any more agility. So what we got to focus on is, are we focused on outcomes? What are the business outcomes that we're trying to do? And then figure out the minimal amount of change to our practices that would actually support that, as opposed to just being oriented on just doing all the practices. Number two failure pattern is where we say, all right, we're trying to do Agile, and like, we'll get the call and somebody will say, can you come train my teams? And it's like, we can, but that's not going to be enough, right? Just doing team level agility isn't enough. And we're going to show you some kind of 3 lenses that we look at, from team to system to organizational. Training isn't just enough, right? We can't just educate everybody in a 2-day class and expect that then agility is going to happen. Like, we've got to figure out how we're going to apply that. We got to provide support in that implementation. We've got to involve kind of the the whole business, not just, technology can't change without the business changing, or finance practices, HR practices. And we've got to optimize what we call the full value stream, of, sometimes we're so focused on trying to make our dev sprint faster, but our planning cycle takes a year before we even get to dev. Well, maybe we need to optimize the flow, or it takes us forever to release and get things into production. So are we optimizing that full thing? And so those are things that we start to look at. Now I'm going to flip over into, these are what we call the 9 business outcomes of Path to Agility. And I'm going to flip over to a tool, and let me click here, and let me jump. I'm going to jump just to a blank organization. This is what we call the Path to Agility Navigator tool. And we're going to do a little activity in here. And I'm going to launch what we call a poll. I'm going to give this link to everybody in chat. So we're going to ask for some participation here. And what I'm going to ask you for is to click that link. And I want you to just vote on, if you're, for your organization, if you had to pick, what are the top 3 things? So I'll give you 3 votes in here, 1 vote per business outcome. What are the top 3 things that you would say you're trying to improve in your organization? If you could only pick 3 of these 9, what are the 3 that kind of surface for you? And so that you can kind of vote in there, and we'll see what answers we kind of get for that. So I'll give you a few seconds here. So again, these are what we call the 9 business outcomes. This is the first conversation we often will have with any of our clients. And we encourage you to have, is we want to, again, orient around the why. Why change? What are we after? What is that reason? And we're going to show you how we can leverage that to inform our actions, as opposed to, again, just focusing on, are we doing all the safe things? Are we doing all the Scrum things in that? Okay, looks like everybody has voted. So let's go ahead and close voting. And so what you see, these blue circles, is kind of our votes that came in. So customer satisfaction is our number 1. Then we have speed and employee engagement, both tied. And then we had market responsiveness, predictability, and quality. So, what we would encourage when you do this type of activity with maybe like your leadership team, is to then have a conversation, like, why customer satisfaction? Why is that important to us? Why speed? Why employee engagement? Does anybody want to argue? Maybe somebody will argue for quality and it'll convince others, and you might revote based on that. And you can do that within the tool as well. For sake of time today, we're going to assume we had a conversation and we narrowed it down to these top 3, customer satisfaction, speed, and employee engagement. Now, as you started to go through and vote, I'm guessing you started to get a sense of there's some dependency across these different things. And so we're going to go ahead and lock those answers in here. And then I'm going to flip back over to the slides here, and let me get those going again. Okay, so what you started to get a sense of across these different business outcomes is there is a dependency, right? There is some things unlock others. And so the top vote getter, customer sat, isn't a surprise, because that is ultimately what we are trying to do, is deliver more value to our customers, have happier customers, more engaged customers. But sometimes we don't have customer sat because we're not very responsive to the market. And maybe we're not responsive to the market because we don't have a speed of delivery. Maybe we don't have speed of delivery because we have quality issues. Maybe we don't have quality issues because we have employee engagement issues, right? And so some of those other votes that came in, right, when you voted on that, those different things, and you said, one of you voted for quality, 2 of you voted for speed, 2 of you voted for employee engagement. And so sometimes when I'm facilitating this activity, I might reframe it to say, Okay, given we ultimately want customer sat, what is it that we need to focus on in the next 3 to 6 months to try and improve that would help move the needle on customer sat? And that's where maybe speed or employee engagement or something like that may surface, as that's the thing we need to focus on right now. And so we really want to try and encourage, it's hard for leaders to even get to 3, but then we even want to try and encourage them to get to, like, what's the one for right now? What's the top priority thing that we're trying to improve right now? And again, that's going to help us inform the actions that we want to take. So that's the first activity that we would do with Path to Agility and Path to Agility Navigator. Now, in order to get to the next activity, I need to introduce a little bit of the model. And so you've probably all seen like this kind of change curve before. And when we think about agile adoption or agile transformation, we need to think about, like, this is what's starting to happen within our organizations as we start to introduce new concepts and new changes. And so, and it's a natural human reaction that when we introduce change, people go into kind of like chaos and resistance. It's like, hey, say I came to you and said, hey, you're going to be a Scrum Master, and you've never been a Scrum Master before. You might be excited about the opportunity, but you're also going to be fearful because it's like, in stress, and it's like, I've never done that before. I don't know if I can be successful at it. And so we've got to recognize that we're causing these types of changes on others. It's not just, hey, we're teaching a new process and we're just applying new rules. We've got to think about organizational change management techniques. And that's what we've done with Path to Agility, is we've taken organizational change management patterns, mix them in with agile adoption patterns to build an approach around how we can move folks forward around kind of an agile adoption journey, in a kind of custom but a proven way. And so what that starts to boil down into is we've identified kind of 5 key stages that agile adoption goes through. And the first one is what we call align. And a lot of times the align stage gets skipped. So align is about, like, are we aligned around the why change, the exercise that we just did? Are we all clear that our number one thing is about speed? And here's our reason why. Here's our urgency to change. If you read anything around change management, one of the first things that we've got to do is have a clear sense of urgency for the change that everybody's bought into and everybody's motivated by. And often leaders will skip that. And the message is, we're implementing SAFe, right? Well, that's not very motivating. That's not very clear why, right? Implementing SAFe isn't necessarily the wrong solution. It's just that often we don't do a good job of clearly communicating the why behind it. So then everybody starts to resist it, which is, again, a natural human reaction that we see in this change curve. But they're going to resist it even harder when they don't understand why we're doing it, right? So we want to make sure we get through that kind of alignment around why, alignment around what is the new status quo, new North Star that we're trying to get to, so that everybody can be rowing in the same direction and everybody motivated by that. Then we have what we call the learn stage. And the learn stage, part of learning is like actually learning the right terminology, everybody being aligned around the right terminology. But really that's kind of on the border of align and learn, I would say, is like training and education. But we don't finish learning in the classroom, right? Say we do 2 days of training. That means we maybe learned all the terms, we learned what we're supposed to do. That doesn't mean that we actually have put it to practice and we actually have learned how to do it until we start actually doing it. So that stage of learning is really about, are we creating a culture of learning where we have meaningful retros, we're taking action, our organization is improving. And then we get to a more predictable stage where we're saying, all right, we're taking the volatility out of, like, we have visibility to all of our work. We have visibility to a velocity or throughput type of metric, so that we can be predictable. We can make informed business decisions about, like, that we can do this or we can do this. And then that allows us to go faster. That's the accelerate stage. And we believe you got to get predictable first, because if you're not very predictable, you say go faster, like, you're just putting more noise in the system. So like, you got to get more predictable, and then you can start to tune the engine. And then the 5th stage is what we call adapt, which adapt is around Are we adapting based on the market? Are we able to be responsive to something's changed in the market and we can respond quickly to that, right? But we can't respond quickly if we can't deliver quickly. So like that's the dependency of adapt on accelerate. If it takes us 3 months to get a release out the door, well, then we're not going to be very adaptable, right? Like we don't have the ability to be adaptable. But, so like adapt is built around, are we getting faster? If we're getting faster, that means that we're also getting more predictable. In order to get more predictable, we need to have that learning culture. In order to get through all of this, we need to be aligned around that. So that's all these stages kind of build. We're going to show how these start to break down. It's not that we got to do everything in a line before learn. It's not, waterfall in that way, but there is this kind of notion of different levels that the organization is going to go through. Now, we also need to look at the dimension. Another dimension is like, where in the organization are we talking about changes happening? And this is what we call the 3 levels of path to agility. So the one that's easiest to understand is the level of the team, right? A Scrum team, a Kanban team, 7 plus or minus 2 people, like that team, that cross-functional Agile team is, changes have to happen there, right? And we have a lot, this is where there's the most documentation in the Agile space around how should teams work in an Agile way. But we also need to look at what we call the system of teams, right? The system of value delivery, the flow of value delivery. Most of our organizations, it requires more than one team to get something out the door, right? And so we need to think about, are we optimizing the flow of value delivery through the system of teams as well? And there's different practices, and here's where SAFe gives us a lot of different practices, or less, or a lot of our scaling frameworks give us practices on how can we manage work across the system in an effective way. But we also need to look at the organizational lens, and at this level we're talking about how leadership is showing up, how our culture and mindset is shifting, our organizational structure, are we even aligned to value? Our HR practices, our people practices, are those in alignment, or are we still doing like project-based budgeting versus funding value streams, for example? Are we shifting things at that organizational level? We've got it. In order for an organization to work with organizational agility, we're going to have to do things and make changes at all 3 of these levels. You can't really just do something at one of these levels on its own in isolation. You could take a slice through a small part of an organization and do that, but you really need to make impact at all 3 of these levels. And so those are what we call the 5 stages in the 3 levels. And so you might have seen when I was flipping through, I'm going to flip back over to the Navigator tool. When I was in here, I showed, I flipped through this map picture really quick. And so let me do a little zooming in on this. And so what you see here, this is what we call the path to agility map. And you're starting to see where we've started to outline a set of what we call agile outcomes and agile capabilities. So there's 27, actually in this version we just released, we're just about to release, there's 26 agile outcomes and 100 capabilities. And what you see them organized across the top, you see the 5 stages that we just talked about: align, learn, predict, accelerate, and adapt. And then down the left, you see the 3 levels. And so what we're seeing is these are the different things that an organization needs to develop the capability of in those, you cross-reference that stage to that level, the things that we need to do from an adoption perspective. And so what we use this tool and this technique for is that what we can do is we're going to do this together. So let me go ahead and launch this. We're just going to look at, for the sake of time today, we're going to look at the first 2 stages, and we're going to do a little bit of an assessment. And so again, I'm going to give y'all a link in the chat. Let me copy this and throw this out here in the chat. So go ahead and click that link. And we're going to do a little bit of poll. So what I want you to think about is your organization. And I'm going to ask you to assess. I'm going to give you, these are, again, there's 11 agile outcomes, and we might not get through all of them today, but we'll look at a couple of these together. And on your view, you have the ability to assess this thing, compelling purpose. And you've got these choices down below: not met, slightly met, partially met, mostly met, fully met. So let me go ahead and open voting, and you can participate. So go ahead and jump in, links in the chat. And this first one, I want you to think about: is your organization aligned and motivated by a clear organizational purpose, vision, set of objectives, and a compelling purpose for change and improvement? So that's kind of that first one that we're looking at, is to say, all right, are we, do we have kind of that clear, purpose for our organization? Oh, hold on, Seth's telling me my poll has ended. Maybe I put the wrong link in there, actually. I think I did. Let me copy. That was maybe the old link.
Yeah, and when you send the link, make sure and select everyone.
Oh, whoops. Yeah, I sent it to you. It doesn't help if I send it to Seth. Does that one work better?
Thumbs up.
Okay. All right. We're getting better progress on that one. All right. So all right, so let me okay, so I see some people jumping in there. I'll add a little bit more time on that one. And again, once you jump in, so that link is in the chat, and you can vote by just clicking on not met, slightly met, partially met, mostly met. And so let me go ahead and let's see where we are at with that. Hold on, I'm seeing some questions in the chat. So Seth, your link that you just posted is different than the link I just posted.
Oops, yeah, it is. I was trying to make sure that it went to everyone, but
So
it's the one that ends with the C.
Yeah, well, yeah. All right. Let's try that again. Oh, I see. I'm not sending it to everyone. I'm sending it to
and I was trying to take the one you
analysts.
sent, but then I didn't.
Got you. All right. My apologies. That was my bad. Seth was trying to fix me, but I was sending it to just hosts and panelists. All right. All right. Now I see people jumping in there. Good. Okay. All right, so let's reboot. Compelling purpose. Organization is aligned and motivated by a clear organizational purpose, vision, set of objectives, and a compelling purpose for change and improvement. And we're just assessing our current organization. All right, looks like we got everybody in there. All right, so this isn't uncommon, right? Like I said, a lot of times organizations end up skipping this step of being clear about that, but it's really important, right? If we don't have clarity around that, then what's going to happen is we're going to not have, we might not have people motivated. We're surely not going to have people aligned. So think about this scenario, like that business outcome activity we did with those yellow cards. Do you think when you put a set of leaders in a room that when they walk in the room, they think they're aligned on the reason why? Probably, right? But then when we do the poll, they realize, oh, we're not actually on the same page. All right, let's look at the next one here. So the next one is what we call rollout strategy. So this one's around that organizational change management type of stuff, and saying, do we have a clear set of people? We call the Agile leadership team and Path to Agility, but do we have a clear set of people who are kind of owning the transformation and are starting to build a roadmap? Looking at, let me go ahead and open voting, sorry. And that are looking at what is going to be kind of the shift of maybe organizational structure. What are the top risks? What's our rollout strategy? Like, where are we going to do changes? What changes are we going to make? Do we have a team that's starting to think about that, right? And take ownership of that. So that's what we're looking for with this one. So we'll give everybody a few more seconds here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And oh, this one we're not so good, right? So the challenge is here, if we don't have this in place, then who owns it? If it's just that everybody owns it, then nobody's going to own it, right? And so what we typically encourage is the formation of a cross-functional, what we call ALT, or Agile Leadership Team. This isn't the leadership team as much as it is members of potentially the leadership team, but it also could be like an Agile champion or a senior scrum master or a product manager, right? A cross-functional team representing all the areas that will be impacted that are working together to advance the change effort, right? And again, back to organizational change management. All right, let's look at the next one, which is called products are defined. Products are clearly understood, defined, understood, and serving as a driver for organizing the system and teams. Like, do we understand, if you're a technology organization, do you understand the valuable products or services that you provide? Is that clear? Is that defined in your organization? Or is that not, right? And so that's what we're trying to get to with this one. So let's wrap this one up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So a little bit better, but we still are on the left side of this one. That one really leads into the next, which is if we define the ways we deliver value, the products that we provide, what we want to do with that is then say, do we have our teams aligned around that value? Are we optimizing our system of teams to be delivering value with minimal dependencies? So this would be like in SAFe, this would be where we do value stream mapping. We define an art that is fully contained within those teams. Do we have that done in a way that is effective so that we're minimizing the kind of handoffs and dependency chains that are happening across teams, and also our connection to kind of the business or the value side of things? So we're going to close voting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this one we've got a partially met, but mostly not met on that one. And let's jump over. I'm just gonna this one's tied in. Let's do team empowerment. So now we're over into the learn stage, and we're looking at team empowerment, which is saying leaders are shifting. So our leaders letting go, and our leaders letting the teams take ownership of their work, our teams getting autonomy, right? And our leaders kind of shifting the way that they're maybe behaving and thinking and communicating is what we're looking for here. So we're going to close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we got one group that, we're mostly met and leaders are on board and shifting, and ones that are maybe just, at least they're not met, but most are in a slightly met there. Let's jump down to a team level one, which is visibility created, like that we have clarity of all the work, right? It's all visible. It's planned. It's like our planned work, like our backlog is clear. We have more than a sprint's worth of backlog. We know everything that's in progress. Everything that people are working on is visible in a tool like Jira or ADO or something like that. And that we are, creating that visibility all the way with our stakeholders. Right now, the last one might trip us up a little bit. So how are we doing on that? Do you think we have all of those things? Mostly, fully met, mostly met, partially met? Closing voting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think we lost Seth. That's why it stopped. Okay. Let me go ahead and open voting on this one. And for this one, we're looking at team ownership. So this is if our leaders are letting go. Now this one's more about, are the teams taking ownership, right? Leaders can let go, but then our teams have to take ownership. Are they self-organizing? Are they owning their work? Are they owning their improvement? Are they having like meaningful retros and getting better, right? How are we doing on that front? So going ahead and closing voting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so that one's pretty good, right? So we're mostly met on that front, and we have one partially met. So I'm going to go ahead and set that one to mostly met. So again, this is what we call ability to poll. We believe that for assessments, that the best kind of assessments are ones that we're doing with the people that like they're self-assessing, right? And we're having conversations and we're generating actions from that. We don't believe in assessments that are like, everybody go off, vote on your own, there's no conversation, and then it just turns into like a report card and a grade, and then it can be weaponized. That's not really a healthy assessment environment. So we want to create it. We're providing a tool where we really feel like that needs to be like self-assessed. We want the people who are involved in this and can take action to improve it to be involved in that process. So that's one way that we would do that. Now, what we just did was we did this at what we call the agile outcome level, which are these 26 things in this map that you see here. So that's what we often will do first to get kind of a quick snapshot. And we might, like this time we did most, like the blue ones are ones we haven't assessed yet. So we start to get this heat map, right? And often what we'll do the first time through is maybe just do that for align, learn, predict, and we can do that in a 30-minute, 60-minute session with maybe a leadership group across. And again, we're aggregating at that point like all of our teams. I'm going to show you how you could do a single team here in a second. We could do that across all 5 stages. But a lot of times what we'll do is like, let's just do align, learn, predict, get something out there, get to our first actions, and then we can come back and fill in some of the gaps around accelerate and adapt. Depending on where we are. If there's a lot of green in align and learn, then maybe we start looking accelerate. But often we'll see what we're seeing here, which is there's plenty of work to do on the left of this map, right? So what we see here is, again, how we started to assess where we are. And I'm going to go ahead and magically load up one that already has a lot of the data in it. So let's say we're into this organization, and I'm going to go back in time in this organization. Let's say this was our first like assessment, right? Lots of red, lots of opportunity, lots of things that we could do. But then what we've done is over time, you can start to see the story that gets assembled is that we're able to see the progress that's being made over time, and where we started with kind of this very red and orange and yellow, and then ultimately we started to get to a higher stage. So and we're going to show you how did we start to make that progress. What you see on this map is you're seeing also these kind of trend lines, these like watermarks, if you will, on each of these boxes are showing like action enabled. Historically, we didn't make a whole lot of progress, but recently we've had an uptick that's gotten us into kind of this 50% level. Rollout strategy has had constant improvement and is at 80% right now. I'm wondering, is there like products defined has had a huge uplift recently. Most of the ones over here on the right have been pretty flatline for most of the time that we've been involved. And that's pretty common, right? We're going to see improvements in behaviors on the left earlier than we will see improvements here, because those lines that you see are lines that are showing dependency, right? And that like even though we want faster time to value, the reality is faster time to value might be dependent on complexity reduced and cycle time reduced at a team level. In order to get faster time to value of the system, we might need to have fast cycle time reduced at a team level. In order to do that, we need predictable delivery cadence at a team level. In order to do that, we need team ownership, right? And you can follow that curve all the way back. And so when we started out of the gate, we might be looking for what is it that we want to do. Now this one had some, I'm going to change it to the 3 that y'all chose here, the 3 business outcomes. And then what we can start to do is overlay and say, all right, if speed is the one that we're after, we can start to get a sense of what are the things that would move the needle the most on speed. And again, so faster time to value, cycle time reduced. But that doesn't mean that we're going to go start at that faster time to value as much as, again, we need to use the intelligence of the map to start to give us clues of where we should start and where we should put our energy into. So there's a question that came in, and I'm going to kind of answer that. That's like, how often do you do the assessment? Well, so what we just did at that agile outcome level is what we would call more of a, again, the agile outcome kind of like baselining to get an initial heat map. But when we do an assessment, we're actually doing that at a more detailed level. Actually, before I jump there, what I want to show you is each of these boxes on here decomposes into smaller things, which we call agile capabilities. So if we look at, say, compelling purpose, for example, within compelling purpose, if you remember that description, was the organization is aligned and motivated by a clear organizational purpose, vision, set of objectives, and compelling purpose for change. So there's three capabilities here. What is it that we have from an organizational vision perspective? What is it that we have from an organizational objectives? Do we have clear organizational objectives? And do we also have the urgency to change? And these are three capabilities that we can also assess at a more detailed level. And as we start to do that, let me go to fast forward here. Then we can start to see, so this one's team ownership. There's 7 capabilities within it. And then we can start to get a little bit of a radar here of how we're doing in each of those areas. And so this one shows us that, hey, we're doing pretty good from a delivery team capability, but we have work to do from a team value ownership perspective. And so like team value ownership is things like, do we have a good product owner that's doing all the right product ownery things if we're a Scrum team? And that may be something that we're limited by, right? So when we do assessments, we typically want to do those at that more detailed level, at the capability level. And so that first initial baseline will take some time. And so what we often will do is we can do that with individual teams. So this one has two teams loaded in here, only has data on one of those teams. But each team could go through and do an assessment. We had a client recently that did a 300 team assessment. So they had teams are organized into different systems. And so each of those different systems, right? So you can build out all that hierarchy of like, these teams are part of this system. So they went through and did that assessment though at all of their different teams individually. And they did those in sessions that took about 60 to 90 minutes to get the initial baseline, to get to kind of through align, learn, and predict. But that's typically enough to get like clarity of where should we start? What are things that we can do? We can always come back and add, accelerate, and adapt in there later when we're ready. Then there's to answer the question, there's kind of 2 approaches that people take in terms of how often they update the system or update the assessment data. One of those techniques is that they will run, kind of make sure that on a quarterly basis, we are reassessing where we are and doing that in kind of more of a batch type of process. And so again, that would be kind of running another, like using one of your retrospectives for your teams once a quarter to kind of revisit, do the assessment, and the value of the assessment would be in identifying some actions to take, right? And what do we want to focus on over the next quarter from an improvement perspective? So that's one mode of how people use the tool. The one that we actually encourage the most is not necessarily that, because it can be heavy to do every quarter. And then it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind for, most of the year. So what we find is the teams that really get the most value out of this is when they do the assessment and they can capture like work items of like, what are things that we're doing to improve, and capture that. And you can start to see that across all the teams. So you can start to see patterns of like, everybody's complaining that they don't have a good product owner, or, whatever that might be. You can start to get that visibility of what are all the improvement items that everybody's trying to take. And then what we encourage is when we say, okay, well, we've been working on getting a product owner, and now we've gotten a product owner. At that point, we can reassess how we're doing on this capability of team value ownership, right? And at that point, we could go in and update that one, right? In that one again is, under team ownership, team value ownership. I could then go in and update the assessment value of that item. And I could just do that every 2 weeks, right? Like if we say, hey, this is what we're trying to improve in this after this sprint, and we're working on that. And then as we finish that item, then we say, hey, was there anything that has changed? And we're just updating 1 or 2 items every 2 weeks is a healthier pace, and it kind of keeps everything kind of front and center from an improvement perspective and how we're tracking that. And that gives us more consistent data over time as opposed to kind of the big batch process. And again, how that assessment is done at the capability level, you can see here. So I've gone into an assessment. You can see the hierarchy. This one, we just have one org, one system, 2 teams underneath that, but I could have any, infinite level or, any number of systems, any number of teams, whatever your organizational structure is. Here's an assessment that's kind of in progress, if you will. Each team can create their own poll, right? So, like what we've been doing, this is what we call a poll. So this one is just like that Agile outcome one, except for there's a little bit more detail on the capability level. There's also the ability to add notes and things like that in here as you're going along. And, but this one, has 34, questions in that poll. And so, what you can see here is if I was kind of the administrator of like, I've asked my organization to go reassess, I can monitor that, okay, team 1 has answered 31 of 34 capabilities. Team 2's only done 14 of 34. The Scrum Masters would have the ability to mark things as complete. Hey, that's all we're going to do. And then I have the ability to kind of publish this data out. And so what's happening is, they're going in and adding in, potentially adding in notes on like, hey, this is the item that we want to improve. That's where they can add work items and do all that through this interface here. So let's see. So I've kind of hit on most of the areas here. And so I see some questions coming in. Feel free to add some more questions in there. And I think I'm about to shift over to answering those questions as I just kind of wrap up the last slide here, which is, just thinking about, whoops, how did I get there? Here we go. So again, what we're looking at with Path to Agility is, the ability to kind of get a sense of what is our current, we believe, like what's our current state, where are we trying to go, so that we can make sense of what are all the different things that we could do and start to identify like what's the right next step that we can take to be able to visualize the progress that we're taking over time. Because a lot of times, even though we want customer sat, that's a lagging indicator, and we need to be able to show progress of what's happening. Like, okay, our customer sat scores aren't going up yet, but we want to be able to show that we're actually getting improvement and that new capabilities are being developed. Path to Agility can start to show the value of what we're doing from a transformation or from a coaching perspective. We can then analyze that to determine those next steps and be able to prioritize and start to build kind of a backlog for our transformation, if you will, and be able to track kind of those impediments and improvement items that are happening across all of our teams. So that's what we're looking at with that. So let's see. So we talked about how we do assessment. So I'm just kind of looking at the other questions that are in here. Again, feel free to add anything. So the one question that came in is, could a system be like a portfolio? So often the portfolio, so it is possible that a system, but portfolio typically sits above systems. So a portfolio often will have multiple systems in it, but it also depends on the size of your organization. And so what you see within this this agile outcome called ability to focus is a lot of those portfolio capabilities. And so here's where we would be assessing the portfolio at an organizational level of, how, do we have portfolio sequencing, funding, visibility, and forecasting of that portfolio. So that's a little bit higher level for us. The system would be more, if you're safe, like that would be more of the art level, where we're doing PI planning would be at the system. Portfolio would be planning the portfolio efforts across multiple systems often. Okay. There's a question also, can the work item be linked to Jira? Or would you add that link to the description? So we do have on our backlog potentially some Jira integration, but yeah, what organizations are doing now is like, if you go into this item, yeah, I could just add the link to a Jira item. If we're also tracking some things there, I could just add that into the description here. So there's not necessarily, and then you could do like a cross link back, for that as well, but it would be manually. It's not, not automated, or an auto linking in that regard at this time. All right. Let's see. Will you be, from a record, there's a question around the recording. Yep, we will definitely be sharing the recording of this afterwards for everybody that signed up for the webinar. Let's see. Are there any leading indicators you would look for? I might need a little bit more specifics, but I'm going to take a guess, right? So what we typically are looking at is, so one thing to think about, and I think that was in response to me saying customer sat was a lagging indicator. So there's two parts to that. One is, if we go back to this diagram here, customer sat is a lagging indicator because quality might be the more leading, like quality and speed might be things, or employee engagement might be dependencies, if you will. So like those things I would also, maybe we don't have customer sat because our cycle time is really long, or our quality, our escapes of bugs to the field is really high, right? So those could be things that are earlier, that if we could start improving, then over time, maybe our customer sat would increase. But then the other things that we look at is just saying, sometimes it might just take long for the business outcomes to be impacted, right? If I look at speed and I look at where these 9 agile outcomes are, they're further to the right, if you will, right? And so there's a lot of work that we got to do over here to the left that might help us get faster delivery. For example, if we follow the system chain of faster time to value alignment, and having clear value, like a clear, these teams are oriented to delivering to value, and the system is built around that. Think about a cross-functional system aligned to value. That might be the big dependency thing. So the leading indicator would be, are we getting this item to green? And if we can get that capability, then that's going to start to unlock our ability to coordinate the value delivery system, which will lead to our ability to start to optimize or reduce the complexity of that system, which then will ultimately lead to that system as delivering more value. So the leading indicators would be more some of these agile outcomes and agile capabilities to the left, right? Those are things that would help me with that. And then there was a question around the business outcomes. Yeah, we have some guidance in some of the documentation around each of the different business outcomes and potential measures that you could put in place around those. And so that's something that we provide some guidance around. And we started to add in some capabilities here around starting to track some metrics. So there's kind of two metrics. Let's see, since I just changed all these values, I don't think I have any data in here, but there's the ability to add in. So I think this one was speed, right? So I could add in a cycle time type of measure in here, and start to track a cycle time measure month over month. But at the same rate, I'm going to get what this outcome score is basically the average of all of these, the highlighted 9 capability or outcomes, it's going to give me the average of that score over time. So what I'm would be able to look at here is what's happening with our cycle time over that period. And then what's, and I could do an employee engagement score as well, but like in this case, what's our cycle time and what's happening from the capabilities that impact speed. And so I can start to see that over time as well. Let's see, any other, I don't think, Seth, I think the rest,
Yeah, I don't see any more, although
yeah.
I was out and I didn't necessarily get all of them refreshed when I came back in. So
Yeah, no, I think they're all there. Okay. Well, we are coming up on time, and appreciate everybody jumping in today and learning more about Path to Agility.